says.
There you go, live. Okay, so this is Religious Debate Channel. Joel Pearson and Alan Kinsey interviewing Joshua Hodson, although Josh is also part of our channel, so this is just your first appearance.
Yeah.
And of course, Josh just had a baby, although not
Yes.
personally from his own body.
From his own body, and congratulations. And also, he's the first Christian atheist I've ever met or ever known to exist.
There's not many of us, so it's fair enough.
Is that anything like the Clergy Project?
Sorry?
Is that anything like the Clergy Project, where you've got closeted Christians?
Yeah, no, not exactly. No, we're overtly atheist, or at least agnostic, but are still connected within we like the traditional side of it, so we still are people who will attend church.
And
Uh-oh,
we lost sound.
We lost Joel.
Josh,
I mean, you still, yeah.
There's actually a growing number. Interesting thing.
Okay, you cut out there for a second.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no,
got you back. Is there anything like Robert Price then? Because he's very into the tradition.
Yeah, I'd say it's one of those things where, the second you chuck a label on it, you're meant to define it, whereas really it's just an individual thing. I actually think it's a form of PTSD with me. I can't get over, but
it's more of a need.
Yes, it's exactly it, actually, because I mean, we'll get into this probably later, but I was at the point where I sort of decided a lot of it wasn't true. I hit real hard depression, and despite working with different people, one of the things that brought me back was the tradition of it. So it's
Would you like to sort of start at the beginning, because I know you came from a very religious background. You were more or less traveling all over the world. So just give us some sort of background on how you grew up and how you finally became a Christian atheist.
So I was born into a very Christian household, and my parents were church leaders from before I was born. My dad did the whole get the Bible degree, and our family is actually, so there was some slight positives to the family, because it prided intellection quite a lot. So everyone put in the effort to learn as much Greek as they could, and sort of if you went through the academic route, that was really well prized. So we weren't actively ignorant as a family, but it was all heavily couched within Christianity and within Christian behavior. And my parents were missionaries, so I was born in England, but I spent my first few years in India, where my parents ran a sort of fair trade business before fair trade existed, while also working for a church over there. Then moved back to the UK for a time period. Then after that, went to Mozambique, then France, then Switzerland, and then I came back to the UK after that. So, one of the things you notice with children who have grown up in households of, who've traveled a lot, we have much more personality problems, a little bit more messed up than your average kid.
I think we might all fit into that group.
Yeah,
I was a missionary kid as well.
Yeah, and
I wasn't.
You've travelled a fair bit.
Yeah. Mozambique was right next to where I grew up, so don't know what years you were there, but judging by the grey hair that you've got on your head, it was long after I was close there.
Maybe, yeah. When was I there? I was there in the early 2000s. But yeah, no, and also did did traveling around the area. So I spent a good time in Zimbabwe and also South Africa, a little bit in Kenya and stuff. So did a little bit of within that period of being in Mozambique, around a little bit, and then have done various other trips in and around the region. Most of them missional, but then when I sort of started walking, well, when I left the faith, I also ended up with quite a nice job that allows me to travel a lot. So I followed up my travels, but with film crews now. So it's yeah, probably less destructive, but still quite destructive.
I guess your group won an award recently, didn't they?
Yeah. My name wrong. I'm in Josh Hodson. It was Josh Hodgson, which is, just deeply painful.
We lost you for a second there again, I think, but just got the end of that.
Yeah. So yeah, spent those years. Moved back to the UK after I'd been living in Switzerland, and I had just lost a fiance, and also it was just one of those sort of periods in your life where you ask a bunch of questions, and you start going, yeah, is all that I've believed till this point actually accurate? So I started by the thing is, for me, my granddad was a mathematician and a scientist. So for me, discovering a lot of the scientific truths of the universe didn't in any way upset my faith. They just kind of added to it. So I never had a conflict between evolution and Christianity. But what happened was I got really into history. And it was more learning more and more about the history, particularly of how our theology developed. The more I realized it was mostly a history of manipulation.
Like Eusebius's approach.
Yes. And the more you see that, the more you realize, yeah, most of this stuff is stuff anyone could have come up with. There's nothing divinely impressive about it. But rather than that just completely knocking my faith, I thought I'd get back to the source. I'd get back to I'd find the real truth. I'd be the one person who knew how it all worked. So I spent quite a bit of time teaching myself Koine Greek, learning it from some people I knew who could speak it, but also just reading a whole lot of books. And trying to really understand the original text so I could be the one person. And it was really fun to begin with, because you would hear a preach and you'd be like, that's not what that means.
And
a certain authority.
Oh, yeah, you keep cutting out. I'm wondering if you try switching off the video feed and just do audio, maybe we'll get a more reliable connection from you, because every now and then you're sort of cutting out. Maybe not that picture.
That's my wife. I don't know why.
We can work with that.
Well, I look more beautiful.
That's true. I wasn't going to say that, but sure. I'm not sure about your self-image.
And it turns out I'm a woman. No, and yeah, so I was sort of really enjoying knowing more than those preaching to me, and then I sort of, you can't help but in the process of reading the original text Bible's written in, not understand how copied and pasted it is, how mixed and matched it is, how clumsy a lot of the language is. I mean, there's books like John which are actually beautifully written and well constructed in the Greek. Forgetting content for now, but when we just consider the Greek, John's just quite a beautifully written book. But that's actually the rare thing, especially in the New Testament. Most of the New Testament is really quite ugly. And
well, wasn't Mark intentionally so?
Absolutely, and there's reasons for it. So it's not just that's not necessarily the reason in itself not to believe, but you start to realize that actually, if there was some kind of divine editor behind it, they were terrible.
Yeah, and of course we don't have the original words, which is a bit of a blow.
which is absolutely key. And then you start realizing exactly that actually you have to go through various processes to try and even get close to the original words. And then you start to go, but some of these verses, which I know are either copied from other texts or, or are mismatches of two things pushed together, or actually the authorship's in question and probably was written at a later date. You go, some of those verses I based portions of my life on, and they're just some dude, 200 years after the fact had a funny idea and just sort of spliced it in, and you're going, really? I really based my life on that?
Yeah, the story of Jesus and the woman in adultery is extremely popular for people to take lessons from.
Yes, that's a fantastic example. And so, so it led me to the point where I had to sort of question everything, and realize I couldn't hold on to sort of the truth of Christianity. But I would have said at the time I was still a theist, because
Possibly
it was
a deist, maybe, or
I would have said still a theist technically, because I still think God somehow moved, but it would have been very new agey, wavy stuff. That oh, God is love, and nothing concrete, nothing with any borders to it. But I still somehow needed that word, and actually, then I started looking at much more of the philosophy, because I thought that was where I was going to find my answers. And so reading everyone from, Russell, and trying to find, anyone who was going to give me any kind of insights, because, I'm sure you guys can appreciate when you have a faith change like that, actually, it's traumatic. It's you feel the world's kind of being removed out from underneath your feet. So you want something stable. So I thought maybe the answer was in philosophy. But the more I read philosophy, the more I realized that actually the most sensible worldview was a skeptical scientific one. And that pretty much precluded a theistic God. You could possibly argue for a deistic one at that point. But
yes, well, Russell was a good choice in that respect.
Yeah. Yes. So then I was kind of there, and just one day I had to go, I think I'm kidding myself. I think I have to drop all this behind. So I did that, but it sent me into a massive depression. Like, I know for loads of people, when they do that, they have like this huge release. They feel like free for the first time in their lives. Problem is I really loved church, like really loved it. And unlike many people, I didn't have loads of bad experiences. Now I've had some, and like there's things I regret. So I was involved in, not loads, but I was a little bit involved in some sort of homosexual conversion therapy, and I massively regret that. And I've prayed for people who were just clearly mentally ill, to get rid of their demons, which obviously just made their lives worse. And I massively regret that. But generally speaking, my experience of church has been a really overall positive one. So
yeah, because the people themselves mean well, despite some of their worldviews being containing danger. A lot of people are just generally good people, and they sort of manage to get over it and manage the issues with their faith. But as in, most people don't act as if the God exists. They don't act as if the Bible is true. They sort of pick their own worldview and tiptoe around all the nasty bits.
Exactly.
I think the born again guys really sort of stick to it more than the rest, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
I know with my sort of when I started studying and was born again, I mean, your whole life revolved around God and Jesus and the book and everybody. You preached to everybody that you could see.
But even then, they tend to reject most of its contents.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not sure. I don't think we did, actually. I have to say there's not much that we didn't reject.
But you did reject them.
there's at least, you know, there's always a worldview people are interpreting through, hermeneutic, if you would. And you know, I was laughing with a Catholic friend the other day who was saying, you know, the evangelicals, they try and take everything literally except the bit about the bread and the wine. We take nothing literally except the bit about the bread and the wine. Yeah.
And the resurrection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about dieting advice? Is Jesus high in fat?
Terrible for carbs, but but yeah, exactly. I kind of, and so much of my social circle was connected into the church as well, that you don't just lose your worldview, you don't just lose the imaginary best friend, which actually I found personally very traumatic. But so many friends, so many natural family gatherings that would orientate itself around the church, and so many relationships kind of just disappeared. And I don't actually even blame the people, because beforehand all we would talk about was Jesus related stuff. So when I don't want to talk about that anymore, then, well, I get it. Why would they want to talk to me? So it's
You've got
just
nothing
one of
else
those
to
things.
talk about.
Yeah. But yeah, so
psychologically, there's a huge impact on having friends and groups and regular social gatherings. So if you don't have an alternative network, then yeah, that can be really traumatic.
Yeah. So I ended up just really depressed, really struggling just emotionally and with my mental health. You know, fortunately, I'd managed to hit myself in a good moment work-wise, so I didn't suffer financially, but just emotionally, I was in a just a rubbish place for ages. And then I started to discover the work of people like Andrew Newberg. Have you come across him at all?
The name sounds familiar, but I don't recall.
So he's a neuroscientist, and he specializes in doing research into religious experience in the brain, and just basically gets people from all sorts of religious backgrounds, get them to do their religious practices in fMRI scanners or various different other brain scanners, and compares the results. And it's given us a lot of insight into how the religious brain works, but it gave me personally a massive insight into just how my brain personally works. In as much as, you know, what tends to happen when we look at the difference between atheist and Christian brains, or atheist and believer brains, let's say more generally, is you tend to have a marked difference between sort of more limbic or more intuitive thinking versus more analytical thinking. Between and that's so general, you know, you have a million exceptions. I feel personally I have a very intuitive brain. I'm a natural candidate for being a Christian. You know, I don't know about whether you guys, when you were believers, had this, but I have always had a whole lot of very spiritual experiences. You know, feeling like I had heard God's voice on a regular basis. And
yeah, definitely. It's very easy to get that in the right environment. In particular, when there's a church that has a very skillful worship team, and that they're coherent, they're very good at building up that emotional stake. And when you have a safe environment, and I think, as far as I recall, the brain science showed it was about an 80-20 split, where you've got people naturally inclined towards religion, and then there's about 20% or so that don't have that sort of external influence over their emotions in the same way.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just knowing myself, I am so far in naturally inclined to be religious, it's ridiculous.
So the God helmet would probably affect you significantly.
Almost, like, knock me for 6, I reckon. and there is some evidence that there are specific genes which actually release various DMT-like molecules in the brain, and people with these genes are more likely to be in the clergy. And I guarantee you, I have this gene. Like, there is no way.
Well, it's very much like the as Carrier was talking about schizotypals in early, 2,000 year ago-ish culture, where that was valued and said if you regularly have a tendency towards hallucinating religious icons, then you have more of a position in the clergy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is totally my brain. And it was actually quite relieving to know that, because, there was always this kind of conflict between what I could intellectually discover and also going, but my brain still does this stuff. And so figuring that out and actually going, therefore, for me personally, and this like, in no way is this a general statement for people generally, but for me personally, certain religious practice is actually really enjoyable and quite good for my brain. And so in realizing that, I found the most liberal, open, avoid most of the issues that most religious people have, church possible, and went in, announced, hey, I'm an atheist, but I think I just need to be at church sometimes. And the church was just super supportive of me. Just like, yeah, sure, why not?
They needed a bass player. That's probably why.
Probably. But to the extent now that they've actually got me to do three sort of talks, one on atheism in general, one on Satanism, which because I was talking about that the other day.
Yes, David, about that one.
And that made me laugh. And then I did one on just like general cosmology, because actually that's the other thing I really love about the church I'm with. It's one of the most scientifically literate places in my area, because the vicar, his dad was, until he retired, a meteorologist. The curate, his first degree was a physics degree. The lady who runs the office used to be in forensic science. So like the church is genuinely really quite scientifically literate. So they're not all sitting there freaking out the second you talk about natural selection. In fact, they're quite like, yeah, no, don't be ridiculous.
So in terms of, was that cosmology, or was that more a sort of general history?
So that talk I gave was general cosmology. Just trying to do that classic thing of blowing people's minds about how friggin' small they are and how friggin' old everything is, but then how long it will go on afterwards, and going, basically, you mean nothing. I love doing that.
Yes, so it's some really cool videos about zooming in and out on the universe. Yeah. Oh, your connection's been pretty solid. So do you want to try the video and we'll see whether it's gone all solid again? If it starts breaking up, we'll
stop looking at my beautiful wife. Okay.
I swear we weren't ogling. I think you would probably be really useful to give them talks on sort of the history of the Bible as well, and the early Christianity and what we know about it. So,
yeah, so we're they've actually asked me to do 2 more. I'm literally this Sunday doing one on doubt, and why we should doubt.
It's actually a bit conflicting in the Bible, because there are parts that say you should doubt and be certain, and there are other parts that say you shouldn't doubt.
So that's the thing. I have to go, all these verses, don't listen to them. But what I want to basically do is get people to realize that there's no way you can't doubt. Just being a human, just living your life, and actually doubt can be a good thing to learning more about the world around them. And then they've asked me to do a talk in a couple of months about early Christian history, which I would
love to see that.
I will stay away from the mythicist question, because
it's not necessary.
But I'll kind of pick up from Paul and start talking about that first 100 years, what we know, what we definitely don't know, which
Well, on doubt, there's a potential resource for that. Have you seen the TED talk on being wrong?
Oh, rings a bell, but I can't remember it right now.
It's worth a look, because there's a certain point where she says, "What does it feel like to be wrong?" Do you remember that question?
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, the
yeah.
point being that it feels exactly the same as being right.
Yeah.
So there's that little clip from that actually might help you out on the. People love little clips of videos in their talks.
That's a good resource. I will definitely go look that up. So it's left me in this position where I enjoy and engage with the tradition and practice. So I really like meditative prayers, like the centering prayer, which are much more about meditation. I still regularly have religious experience, but I absolutely believe it's in my brain, nothing outside there. And so I accept the tradition without accepting the metaphysics, but still being staunchly opposed to any of the politics that come out of like Christianity and religion as a whole. That's something
it's
I'm
really
very
dangerous
passionate
politics there.
Yeah.
It's because it's such a intolerant system if you actually take the Bible literally.
Yeah, absolutely, and incredibly intolerant. But religious behavior in general is very good at breeding these intolerant tribal groups, and it kind of has to survive. So whatever form of this weird mix I have, I know my kids won't engage with it, because actually, if I wanted it to survive, I would have to put in all of that fear, all of that intolerance, all of that, and I just simply won't. But it would mean my kids would just be like,
it's as if you've got a benign form which is stopped growing.
But it's why I think it's some kind of weird form of PTSD or trauma, because my brain literally just survives on it. But you take it away.
You could call it addiction through, and then sort of lowering the dosage and surviving on that.
Yeah. I used to be a hardcore fundamentalist. Now I'm just an Anglican.
Taking up vaping instead.
That is the perfect slogan for them. Anglicanism, the vaping of Christianity. I think that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now that's going to be in my head. It's great.
But yeah, as the I don't know, do you guys know the old British TV series Yes, Prime Minister?
Yeah.
I saw Yes Minister. I don't think I watched it up to Yes Prime Minister.
Yeah, it's just a further one from that. But there's this classic moment where he has to decide on the new Archbishop of Canterbury, and he ends up having to decide between an atheist and an anti-royalist. And he goes, well, in the Church of England, God is optional, but the Queen isn't. So
yes, I think there was some statistic I saw where it said 2/3 of Anglican priests are atheists, but I don't know how reliable that statistic was. I couldn't find a source for it. So.
And again, it's how do you define atheist? There'll be somewhere within the deist, and you guys. I mean, it depends where you guys got.
By the time you hit pantheist, I think you are now an atheist.
Yes. It's just some people need to say the word God, and actually I kind of let them. If you are so desperate to still have God, but you have another word for the universe that you call God, I'm like, you know what, you can keep that. I don't need to argue you down.
It is one of those words that loses meaning, really.
Yeah.
It's I had another thought, never mind.
But yeah, so I guess that's kind of, broadly speaking, my kind of story in it. But then there's lots of little twists and turns. I think a big moment was actually when I joined the group, sort of, what was it, like a year ago now. And at that point, I'd done my out of church and then back into church. But me and my wife, unfortunately, quite at a reasonably late stage in the pregnancy, lost a baby. But it was interesting because that was like the first time I really understood the problem of evil outside of an academic kind of context. you know, because it's easy to go, well, free will or whatever. It's easy to kind of hand wave away, but then when you're really angry and you're like angry at the idea that a God could, you know, be a God of love and yet just let your baby die, it's just like, you know what? If that God exists, he's a dick.
Yeah, I remember that you actually had one hell of a rant about it, which you know, sort of brought a lot of people. I think that's not even members anymore, that came out quite angry against you for being so angry at God and being so mean to God.
Yeah, I did go off on one.
God's only a little boy. He needs people to stick up for him.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, yeah. It was one of those ones where you just kind of had to splurge your soul.
It is something that needs to be talked about more, though, because I think a lot of the time it's hushed up and you know, you don't want anyone making a fuss, and it's something that it needs to be. People need to be made aware of the sheer amount of times it happens, because it's something that people can feel quite alone about.
Yeah, absolutely. And the new edition was actually born on the 15th of October, which is Baby Loss Awareness Day. And we thought that was quite a nice little bookend to going, yeah, we've got this new one. But it also came with a remembrance of his older brother, and just being like, yeah, you know, those that we lost, we move on from. But we celebrate the new lives that are here. And I think that's one of the things kind of coming on the other side of theism into atheism, is you have to start to appreciate what's going on around you more. It all matters more. And it's funny how often we get asked why you've got no meaning in your life because you're unbelievers. Therefore, yeah, it's, I don't know about you guys, but my experience is everything means a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, it does, because everything is, you have to live for your life that you've got now, because there's nothing else. And I think this is where Christians sort of lose out on life. They are worried about future life, or the life hereafter, and they forget to live this life the way, you know, to the best they can. And what's more, to leave the world a better place for our children, which a lot of Christians, I must say, are not interested. They don't care about the future world. They care about now and the coming of the supposed Christ and the rapture day. So, you know, it's I think it's much of a muchness that we've got to sort of, we pull away from one thing and we lose something, but we gain something else.
Yeah.
Well, one of the advantages of not being a Christian and the sort of having that kind of hardship is the abolition of what was it, purgatory for infants, or just even the concept of infants going to hell, which is it used to be a doctrine. Yeah.
Although my tradition, not current one but previous one, believed there was a what was it called, age of accountability, which was
7 years old. Yes,
but logically, like, if you genuinely believe that, the kind thing is to go murder all the 6-year-olds, right?
I absolutely agree. It's the logical conclusion of Christianity. If you believe there's an age after which there's even a 1% chance that they will go to hell, then the only logical thing to do is murder them before they reach that age. Because infinity, when you start putting infinity into mathematical equations, then it gets silly very quickly.
Yeah.
If you have infinite torture, then the only thing you can possibly do to not be evil is to kill everyone before that age.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So
it used to be, before you were baptized, you were going to hell. You had to be baptized or christened, then were you only saved, or you were going to heaven. Otherwise you were going to hell.
Yeah. So basically what we're doing is endorsing murder as a channel, right? That's what we're good. I'm glad we're all on the same page.
God bless you, my son.
By the way, we have a couple of people in the chat on YouTube.
I see there's 2 viewers there. I can see one viewer. I almost frightened whoever it was away.
Well, one guy wants to join in, but he seems to be fairly confrontational. What do you think, Josh?
I don't mind someone joining in and telling me how full of crap I am.
Do you want to pop a link in the chat? Have you got it?
I haven't got it up.
I can't invite because I'm not the host.
Is it on the normal feed? Isn't it?
Tell you what, yeah, I will pop the link in there and we'll see what happens.
Can't see anything on the group chat, but
It's got a link with like all the Facebook.
No, okay, the group chat that you see on the right hand side. There's only our group chat. It's not
okay.
it's not
it's not the general one.
Not the general one.
There's a really long link. Are you sure you can't go to the invitation bit at the top and grab the link from there and drop it into, or send it to me and I'll pass it on?
I can drop it into the group chat there, can't I?
Yeah, do that. It's not. Yeah, the group chat. Yeah, that'll be fine. Yeah, because the Facebook one gets Facebook stuff wrapped around it.
Yeah.
All right.
It's right here. Here we go.
Let's give this a try and see what happens. It'll be a first for our channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all it can happen is it go terribly wrong in the world ends. That's the worst of it.
Exactly.
Are we worried?
Well, we dropped a link. We'll see if Fred has hangouts.
Give Trump half a chance, and he probably will. In the world.
Yes,
but he was chosen by God as well, so that.
Him, they all were, weren't they?
Yeah, him.
So, Josh, you've read a lot more. You've read a load more about the Bible and everything I have. How long have you been studying that for? Or sort of from? I guess you were studying it when you were still a Christian, anyway.
Yeah. So kind of all my life, and that was one of the advantages of growing up in a home that prized the academics, is that we weren't scared when there was an alternative theory. You would just talk about it. So although they obviously favoured all of the conservative scholars and all the various apologists, it wasn't like taboo. So it's been very much in the kind of my family's DNA, just talking about it. And I kind of, it was therefore all in the background, but it was when I started really learning Greek and doing that through dissecting the scripture that I really got into kind of figuring out the history. Because I think, you do notice this quite a bit with really well-meaning and intelligent atheists who actually often read the Bible like it's like they were sort of a fundamentalist who actually didn't ever bother learning hermeneutics, which is kind of fine because someone needs to argue against those people who read it that way. But it's actually most people who spend their time reading Bible don't read it that way. Most people apply hermeneutics, but in all sorts of ways, and try and look at its context, try and look at it historically, even with a load of faulty logic. There's no end to bad arguments within the sphere, but they are trying to engage with it in that sort of way. So for me, it was really important to really know what I was talking about.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah,
and therefore, I just read loads and loads and loads and loads, all I could get my hands on, from all different angles and different points of view.
Hey, we've got Jordan Peterson.
Is that Jordan Peterson?
That'll be Fred from the YouTube channel. I'll delete the link now. But we got no audio yet, so we'll carry on talking until Fred's able to join properly. That is indeed Jordan Peterson, Alan.
But yeah, so getting all that information in, and you guys appreciate this, that it's actually quite difficult with especially biblical studies, is trying to condense it down to actually find out what's accurate and what's true. because not only do you get all those people who are religiously motivated, which is true, it also just attracts all the crazies, all the cranks. End up with just crazy conspiracy theorists. And I mean, I actually appreciate you, Joel, on the other, if we're allowed to talk about it, but your other group, your mythicist versus historicist Jesus group. I appreciate how often you challenge the crazy mythicists.
Well, they just make my job harder, don't they?
Yes, they do. It's, there's a bunch of people somewhere in the middle trying to have a reasonable debate with some interesting ideas, and it goes back and forward. Then there's just total waste both sides of insane
yeah people. Well, you can tell the ones who are doing a good job, and they'll be the ones who are so if anyone says that they know for certain either way, then they're the ones who are at the edge.
Yeah. Yes, basically. I know what the truth is. You all have to believe me. And they're wrong. But so it's been a passion of mine, and it's still my favorite ancient text. I can't get away from it. However many times I've tried to get engaged with the Odyssey, it just doesn't do it the same way for me.
I like reading translations with footnotes and so on. So The Art of War is a great book, but specifically the one that was translated in, I think, around 1911 by a British naval officer, I think it was, a lieutenant.
Right.
And he added in all these comments from Chinese generals over the years, 10 different amazing Chinese generals. So you have these fragments of The Art of War, which have the pieces of one volume out of 64. But then you have all these stories of these generals who tried these tactics and are talking about how it really worked. So when you have an ancient text, it often helps to have sort of all the commentary that's come since.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is ultimately key in understanding any ancient text, but any ancient text that's become culturally relevant, because you have to see how, people 500 years ago interpreted it, as well as people when it was first written, to actually kind of understand what it's done and what it's meant. But it's just a hell of a lot of work, that stuff I'd love doing on my free time. But still no Frank, just
Jordan Peterson is still silent.
Jordan Peterson is. It would be hilarious if it was him.
That would make my day.
He joined and left, and then he joined again. I don't know whether his mic or something's not working or whatever. Maybe he's got the same problem I had originally when I first tried to.
Give me an email address to send a link to. I'll give it a try. Let's carry on.
Carry on rewardless.
But yeah, so, and I do think the Bible is, there are bits I still find interesting and fascinating. I genuinely think Paul was an interesting thinker for his time. Not in any way divinely unique, but some of his views on actually how equality should work, and how actually, less about society as a whole, more about individuals engaging with things, were kind of interesting for the time, and interesting that they kind of grew into what they did become. So I still enjoy the Bible from a just its content sometimes as well. But
I think it's actually a fantastic book to read. I mean, it's a masterpiece, isn't it? Really, the poetry and the rubbish that's in there makes it well worth reading all time.
But if we're going to if you disqualify ancient texts for their kind of superstition in it, then you don't read a lot.
I don't know if you've seen the very old sort of the Wycliffe copies and that stuff. The English and that thing is flipping unreal. I've actually got a copy here, and love trying to get my way through it, because the English is.
We have Fred. So Jordan Peterson is a different person who first saw the link.
Ah. Oh. Hiya, Fred.
Got some sound from Fred.
Hello. Is my mic working?
It is. Yep. We can hear you.
Good. Okay. So, oh, I see extinct. You have a picture of Cornelius Van Til. You like Van Til?
Jordan Peterson.
Oh, yeah,
he's extinct. He's not talking.
Cool. Yeah. So we got 2 people in through the links. That works.
Okay.
So what was it you wanted to say?
Which one of you are atheists?
All of us.
Everyone on the screen is except for me?
Oh, well, we're not sure about the Jordan Peterson guy.
Oh, okay. Okay. So what is your rational basis for atheism?
Oh, up to you, Josh. This is your talk.
Okay, so it depends how we're defining atheism to begin with. Joel and me would slightly disagree on this. I would classify myself as agnostic atheist, so I don't know, but I haven't been convinced, if that makes sense. So I haven't seen enough evidence to convince me to a position of belief, but actually I wouldn't say that flat out there is no God.
Yeah, I've got no problem with that position, but I'm an agnostic atheist, so I go one step further and say I would know.
Do me a favor. Remove that person just entered. That person is a stalker of mine. They follow me from social network to social network. Please remove them.
Alan,
I think
can you do that, Alan?
Sorry.
Yeah, please remove him. He's a stalker. Please remove him. All right, thank you. Remove him from the room, please. He's a stalker.
Alan, you're the host. You'll have to do that.
He's on his way. He's out.
Thank you.
How did he get the link?
He must have grabbed it when it came in there.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's public.
Yeah.
I did delete the link message. So.
Yeah, he's a stalker. Okay. So, so you have a lack of belief in a creator God because there's no evidence for God. So the universe is not evidence for God?
No.
No, I would not consider it evidence for an intelligence.
Okay. Since you say that the universe is not evidence for God, then what is the causal origin, including the Big Bang and the universe? What is it?
Well, I'm very comfortable with saying I don't know, because no one knows.
As well. I don't know either. So.
Since you don't know, then how do you rule out a creator God?
Oh, no, I haven't ruled one out. I'm just saying I haven't been convinced.
Okay, when you say there's no evidence, you're saying the universe is not evidence for God. You have ruled out God being the causal origin then.
No, I'm saying that I haven't ruled out God being the causal evidence, causal cause of the universe. I'm saying that the universe itself doesn't count as evidence because various things could possibly have caused the universe.
How do you know that?
How do we know that? Because we have some very good, complex, but very interesting scientific ideas. None of them have evidence for yet. So I do not believe any of them either, but they are still possibilities.
Well, so here's the problem. Here's the problem. When we talk about the causal origin of the universe, we could say that the causal origin of the universe is either in virtue of God or not God. Okay? Yeah. There's not a third option. Do you understand that?
You can't have two. You can't have two options. I'm sorry. There's no way you can say it's a yes and a no answer.
Sure, you can. I can say to you right now, tomorrow you will have a slice of pizza for lunch, or you will not have a slice of pizza for lunch. It's called A or not A. It's in virtue.
Completely different sort of question, that, my friend. That is completely different. You cannot have a yes/no answer to that question. You can't. Which God are you talking about? Let's have that out for a start. You're saying God is a creator. Which God? Now you got to name which God it is first before we can go any further. Hello?
Someone else joined his left. There must be links flying about. Oh, Fred dropped out.
Fred dropped out.
He might be
well, he's still got the link. Oh, we got Sigmund Freud as well. Wow, everyone's joining now. This is a lesson about links in the internet.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't frighten Fred away or whatever his name is.
No, he sounded more energetic then. just to fall down at that question. But yeah, he's raised an interesting topic, and we can continue to talk about it until he's back. But I think that the clear thing is saying I don't know is actually the position all of us are in.
Well, that's my position.
You know, not over the question whether it's God, because you know, our friend Joel here says I do know.
Yeah,
but then knowledge is not 100% certainty, is it? Because that's ridiculous.
Yeah, but
I do follow your argument on that. But yeah, anyway. But the question of the origin of the universe ultimately is we simply don't have the evidence to know exactly what's happened. And you know, it's again, anyone claiming that we know what happened, you're automatically, you know, in crank territory for me, because you have no way of looking at it, you have no way of researching it, you have no way of testing it, of collecting any evidence for it right now. Now, if you develop a theory which gets to the point of being able to test it, I'm all on board. I would love to test it. If you can come up with a way that we can test intelligence, create the universe, I am the first person to find funding for that, because I would love to know. I would love to, but we don't have it. So I think everyone has to be honest and say, well, we don't know. I don't know what you guys think.
I'm staying out of it because Gnostic atheism is too complicated to add to this right now.
Well, I think there's a number of issues, right? Which is that.
Hang on. Sorry.
Guy named Jack. Sorry.
Jack, yeah. Alrighty.
Yeah, so this person, Fred Gwynn, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's actually a YouTube celebrity named Darth Dawkins. There's a YouTube channel devoted to him called Darwin's Greatest Hits. He's a presuppositionalist. Are you familiar with presuppositionalism?
Oh, we meet so many of them.
Yeah, so presuppositionalism basically, it has a fundamental flaw, which William Lane Craig pointed out, which is that it's question begging. It's a question begging view, right? It just presupposes that the Christian God exists, right? And then says that therefore all other worldviews are false, right? But there's no reason for anybody to accept a claim like that, right? So, I mean, the thing about Fred Gwynn, which you would know if you had seen, you know, the videos about him on Darwin's Greatest Hits, is that he doesn't actually have a non-question begging argument for the truth of the Christian worldview, right? And so instead, what he likes to do is sort of ask atheists skeptical questions. You know, how do you justify this? How do you justify this? How do you justify this? And then when it bottoms out on something that's just an axiom, right? He says, well, that's arbitrary. You have no reason to believe that, right? And so therefore there's no reason for me to take you seriously. While ignoring that fact that the same procedure could be applied to his worldview. Right? Like, because global skepticism is not an interesting objection, right? Unless somebody has a way of evading it, right? Yeah. So if the same skeptical objections would apply to his view, right, it's not sort of interesting to charge atheists with having an arbitrary worldview. But then what he does is he just argues in a circle and then declares that all worldviews are circular without argument, and then says that circularity is okay on the Christian worldview because it's an instance of virtuous circularity rather than vicious circularity, but is unable to provide a non-question begging criterion for what virtuous circularity is, right?
Yeah.
How exactly that isn't a logical fallacy, right? So that's more or less what you were in for before you disappeared.
Well, well, that's how it would have gone. And yeah, thank you for the rundown. So what's your position, Jack?
Oh, I'm a Gnostic atheist, a strong atheist. I think the existence of God is not really a coherent proposition.
So isn't that agnostic if you think it's not coherent?
Well, I guess you could say that on a certain you can understand the position as you could say that because it's a self-contradictory proposition, it's therefore unintelligible, right? But I'm just saying, by Gnostic, I just meant that I think it's knowable that God does not exist, right? That the proposition that God exists is a false proposition.
If you define them as supernatural, then yeah, they don't exist by definition.
Yeah.
I don't know what. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I guess if there was a naturalistic God, I'm not sure why we would call it a God.
Yeah. Well, I think in some ways that comes back to one of the things I was saying earlier. I don't know if you caught the rest of the conversation. Some people just need to call something God. And it seems to be a psychological need rather than an actual philosophical or, reasonable position to take.
It's like the Arthur C. Clarke approach.
Yes.
I can't understand why everybody's getting muted. Jack, are you still there?
Yes.
All right.
Jack's here. We got so people will mute themselves. Fred got kicked out for some reason, and the link doesn't work for him. But there's not much I can do about that, unless there's anything you can do, Alan.
Nope, it's not blocked or anything. I mean, we were talking to him and he just disappeared. So you can only use the link. There's nothing more I can do. He hasn't been booted or anything from my side.
Okay, I guess we
found the South African accent terrifying.
He wouldn't be willing.
Yeah, you hear it there.
He wouldn't. Fred Gwynn or Darth Dawkins, Darwin's deity. He wouldn't be willing to come in here if I was here because he isn't actually able to answer my objections.
Were you the stalker? Were you?
Yeah, I was the person he was accusing of being a stalker, which just means that I can beat him in a debate, right? Anybody who can beat him in a debate becomes a stalker, and he demands that they be removed because it would be embarrassing for him to be asked questions that he couldn't answer, right?
Well, I do prefer having conversations where we have sort of an equal number on each side. So
yeah,
it would be interesting to have Fred around.
Yeah.
That wouldn't make it equal, actually, because
no, but it's close.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely love the dialogue, so it's always a shame when you lose someone.
Yeah, that's why we're in the Religious Debate group, because we enjoy the conversation. You learn a lot from listening to people with different worldviews from your own,
especially when you're just getting down to the exciting bit and the guy disappears. Not good. No, not good.
I think we should do some sort of maybe not completely open on the internet, but some sort of way of inviting some people who are interested and engaging in the chat.
Possibly throw it out on our debate group and just see who
I wonder if you can you like message just an individual in the chat and send them the link or something like that.
Yeah, you must be able to.
You can.
Yeah, because I put a link in there and then deleted it a few seconds later, and we've had loads of people join since.
Well, just leave it out there, see what we get. I mean, we can.
Jordan Peterson's still with us.
Yeah, just listening. Although, to be fair, we're not doing much apart from talk about the chat itself now.
Yeah. Well, when in doubt,
chat.
Yeah.
Well, I am interested in talking directly about the historicity of Jesus, because that is a fascinating subject, and you're, I think, the most knowledgeable historicist that I'm able to converse with personally.
Yeah.
Apart from obviously like the professional PhD guys.
Yeah, obviously next level to us amateurs, but I also would make it very clear I am agnostic. Like, I'm agnostic, but a bit historicist.
Yeah, agnostic historicist. I would say I'm agnostic mysticist as well. I don't think that there's strong enough evidence in either direction to justify anything other than agnosticism on the position.
I absolutely.
I lean towards the mythicism side of things, but you're still agnostic, but leaning towards mythicism.
Yeah,
I do need to read some more Ehrman, actually. I think, you never know, might tip me in that direction. I mean, did Jesus exist did not shift me in any way in that
It
position.
doesn't come up with anything. This is the problem, though.
Yeah, I really want to see, and as Carrie had said, that he's waiting for this. It's like the best defense, and then we can put the two side by side and say, read that, make up your mind. That's the best for one, the best for the other, and then we can just let the two speak for themselves.
Yeah, I think Ehrman's
Sorry, that
argument-
was Darth Dawkins, or Fred Wynn. He came in under a spy account and then removed me from the call.
I didn't know anyone could remove anyone else from the call except
Yeah,
his-
unfortunately, well, depending on your point of view, there was a kind of new version of Google Hangouts that allowed anybody who was in the call to remove anybody else from the call. You didn't have to actually be an owner or admin or moderator or anything like that. So that's what he was doing. He was trying to get me out of the call so he could come back in.
Oh, well, we don't really know either of you, so can't comment.
Who's the extinct Pep?
Oh, he's just listening.
Okay, I just got something come up here to block him or not to block him.
That was apparently Josh.
Yeah, I just thought it could be another person. Just
Oh, yeah, I think he removed Josh from the call as well, yeah.
Oh. Ass.
You're still here, Josh. We got you.
I just don't understand how anybody can remove anybody from the
Well,
call.
that's the thing, is there's a way to do it with the new version of Google Hangouts. And so sorry, somebody muted me. He's trying to remove
it's
people.
this remove extinct because he's trying to everything.
Alan, can you remove Mr. Extinct? You're muted, Alan. We're going to have to start putting security on this thing, aren't we?
Right.
Not that I have any idea how to do that.
I don't understand why messing around. I mean, it's just trying to be a stupid idiot, dickhead.
Can you remove him?
I don't see him.
No, you can't see Extinct.
No, he's not there.
That's strange.
Oh, there he is. Okay, I got him. Cheers.
This is like watching a sniper.
Yeah, cheers. Cheers, Buddha. There we go.
Okay.
Right. Damn it. This is getting involved now. I mean,
You're going to have to be on it, Alan. You need to take some sort of performance-enhancing drugs.
yeah, I mean, we are talking about something simple like the mythicist of Jesus or whatever, and you got some guy flipping playing around. I mean, you know.
It's an important lesson in cybersecurity.
Yeah, except we don't know nothing about cybersecurity.
Yeah, we haven't learned anything.
Oh,
man. So we've had more fun on this one than we've ever had on the rest.
And
It's
we
great.
actually have
I
decent
just
sound
make
quality.
things exciting.
Yeah, I definitely blame Joshua for that. It's all your fault, pal.
That's good. It'll be good to get the rest of the guys on as well. I don't want to go too open on these. We'll have to figure out what we would normally do to
I think we'll
control
have
a
to
small group. And
I think we might have to put something like perhaps on the main group, invite people to the video chat, and then we screen them and say, right.
we have about 5,000 people in that group, so imagine if they all joined.
Yeah, that would be a flippin'. But I'm just saying, I don't think a lot would. But there's a few people I'd like to get on, like, there's some of the, especially the evangelistic type fellas.
I'd love to get Ben Jones on.
Yeah, I think I'd have some fun with Ben.
I've tried for Ben, and Ben seems to, I hate to say it, he's probably listening, he may be listening, or he'll watch this later. He seems to be ducking it at the moment, I hate to say.
Ben, if you want to come on this, I will be in your ring. I've still got all my old classic theist arguments in my head, and I will, for that one time, be on your side, mate.
I can argue from a theist perspective.
Yeah, actually,
if there comes a point where I have to throw in the towel.
Yeah, but actually, when I invited Ben to join us, it wasn't to debate his belief. It was just to
Well, we wanted his story and his background. This people's stories are really interesting.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with why do you believe and you shouldn't believe or anything like that. I just wanted to hear what his story was, and it's the same with Adam. But he also he pops in and he just disappears again for 3 weeks.
Yeah, we had Jeff's story that was really good. I enjoyed listening to Josh's story as well.
Yeah.
So, people's stories makes for good listening because, do you remember, of course, Yuval Noah Harari pointed out people think in stories. So
absolutely, and I ended up in a massive argument on our site over stories. But I was like, no, we do think in stories.
Oh, what did you think of his 21 Lessons book? Actually, what were the best things you got out of it?
I really enjoyed 21. That I always enjoy his writing. He's generally writing in a way that I'm thinking at the time. So, I was grappling with a lot of the issues and read Sapiens, and it was like brought everything together, thinking about kind of where our future was going to be, and Homo Deus did the same. And
yes, the most mind-blowing thing in Sapiens for me was when he pointed out, what was it? When he said that humanity used to have more than one humanity, and only 30,000 years ago or so there was more than one kind of human alive, and that was pretty mind-blowing because that's something that growing up with a 6,000-year-old Earth you don't get.
Yes, yeah, and there was a little bit of me going, multiple humans. Wait, can I now believe that Lord of the Rings happened?
Oh yeah. Well, there were. Isn't there? There's one named the Hobbit.
Homo florensis. Yeah.
Yes, the Hobbit humans. So there was that. I don't think we had any elves yet.
No, unless you consider Neanderthals elves. But
have you just before this book he has Neanderthals because his is an alternative world in which Neanderthals were reconstituted from their DNA and they're just part of life now, and they're just like they're immensely strong compared to Sapiens, but they're like the most laid back people. So they're just really calm. Right. People try and punch them and they don't care. That's probably about right for Neanderthals.
Yeah. And I love all the recent discoveries of just how much we were having sex with them, and the Denisovans as well.
Yes. We're about 2% Neanderthal from Europe, I think.
Yeah, 2 to 3 normally, and they found the direct Denisovan Neanderthal hybrid. So
there was a close split as well. There's another one even more recent, but I can't remember what they were called. It's in the Phylogeny Explorer project. There's another division just before you get to Homo sapiens sapiens.
It is quite clear we are one horny species. Like there's no denying.
Especially if you read our fantasy, the centaurs. I mean, what was going on there?
Yeah.
It makes you wonder about the mermaids. What about the opposite end?
Yeah. Why is everyone imagining having sex with a mermaid? That's just like
it doesn't work. You'd have to have the head of a fish.
Yeah.
Oh damn! This has gone downhill fast, hasn't it?
Well, fantasy doesn't make sense. This is the problem. You've got skeptics thinking skeptically about fantasy.
Jack's back again.
Yeah, Dark Doc and Fred Gwynn just removed me from the call again. He came in on another of his accounts.
It's fascinating that you can do that.
And then remove me. He's really dying to get in here and talk to you guys without me speaking.
I don't mind him talking to us, to be honest.
I don't mind him talking to us as long as he doesn't boot anybody out.
Yeah, well, he won't come in here if I'm here, so he's trying to remove me from the call so that he can come in.
Well.
We'll actually have to invite him on officially at some point.
Yeah.
You just let him come in and just behave himself, and he can chat, so we can hear what he's got to say. And
yeah, and I mean, Fred, if you're still listening to this, we'd moderate it well, so we'd give you time to talk as well as Jack. So,
assuming we have the ability to control who kicks who, because apparently we don't.
No, that's true.
And I thought I had the ability to kick people out and whatever, but obviously not. We can all do it.
I can't kick anyone.
We are God. Just watch out.
I'm interested in moving on to the next Harari book then. And have you read Homo Deus? I take it
I've read Homo Deus. Yeah.
What do you think is the most likely trajectory out of all those?
Oh, that depends on the day. Sometimes I am convinced that we are 5 years off a technological utopia, and that's going to be incredible. And then other days, I'm 100% convinced we're heading towards an environmental disaster that's going to nearly extinct the species. And then I go a bit bipolar on it, I guess.
Well, it's something that Steven Pinker mentioned. You go on the availability of recent information. So when you recently recall something, so I saw a video of a girl who was given 2 bionic hands that she could control with her mind and was like picking up marbles with them. Tilly, I think her name was. Amazing. Yeah. And then, of course, then there's the Saudi journalist murdered in an embassy. So it's like that makes you think these kind of violent acts are happening right now. And it's these small microcosms that are happening, but each one affects your worldview for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of my work, I work with a lot of kind of technical documentaries and scientific research and documentaries. So I get to see so I get to see an awful lot of really interesting stuff that is just come down the pike, and get to film it and get all these demonstrations. So I really enjoy that. So I am a bit of a technologist. I do think that actually we will solve a lot of our problems through technology. My kind of real question is, how much of the world will we destroy before we've done that?
Yeah, the problem is the funding. So when we start diverting resources to undo the damage we've done in building up this far, we're reducing the amount that we can spend on our future. But it is an investment in our future, but it's damage control rather than direct progress.
Yeah.
So I like to think that we're good at splitting the feed and being able to do damage control and at the same time moving on the projects that aren't doing much damage. I think Ian M. Banks's books about the culture future are probably the ideal where AI reaches the point where it can control everything.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of the people in the field are saying, we've got 70 years, probably 70 to 100 years left of humans actually being economically useful. At that point,
as Harari was pointing out, at
that point, we're no longer going to be of any use, which
that means the loss of political power, and then it leads you to the superhumans basically taking over, because we'll have the point where you can genetically modify yourself, cybernetically modify yourself, and once you reach the point where a human can potentially live forever, that puts the power into the hands of somebody who can really set themselves up with a permanent position, which is really worrying, because when humans keep dying, then it means the worst you can get is them handing it on to their descendants. But at some point, one of their descendants will slip up because they'll be overconfident, or there'll be too many children and they'll have to fight over it, and it breaks apart. So empires rise and fall. But potentially, if you've got somebody who lives forever and has a stranglehold and consolidates their power going on, there's a real danger there.
Stephen Hawkins spoke about AI, that we have to be careful about it, because AI could take over. We could be wiped up. AI don't need us.
Yeah,
it's an interesting thing, because the AI don't have the same motivations as humans. So the AI have whatever motivation you give them, but it's the nature of AI that it rebuilds itself, redesigns itself. So it's very difficult because we won't fully understand it. Any AI that you allow to modify itself for a goal ends up slipping out of human hands very quickly. And as Sam Harris pointed out,
it doesn't even need to be conscious. I mean, that's the idea behind the maximally great paperclip making machine. That is just a machine
turns the whole world into paperclips,
and then goes on and turns the whole universe into paperclips. And all you have is paperclips.
It's something that Terry Pratchett uses in his books, where he'll have the golems, where they have a tendency to do what they're told to the point of stupidity. Where if you tell it to plant a row of beans, you come back and it's done one 300 miles long.
But that would be, I think, the most tragic way for humanity to go out is paperclips.
I think Harari actually said, when it comes to wisdom, everyone needs to be involved, but with stupidity, you need only one.
Yes.
But I think overall, we're cautious enough about it. Sam Harris said in his talk, TED Talk about AI, he said, if you switch on a computer that can think at the sort of rates at which we're able to calculate now, and you leave it on for a week, it has surpassed all of human knowledge at that point, because we only think at such a rate, and 99% of what we know is lost.
Yeah.
We hand it on to the next generation through books, which of course no one can read all the books. But a computer system has no such problem. Yeah, I'm giving it a good shot as well. But yeah, computer systems don't have this limitation. They have the perfect attention span as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is also their weakness, because there is an AI experiment. I believe this was again in Pinker's book. No, it might have been in Yuval Noah Harari's. I forget which. It was about a robot that was supposed to defuse a bomb, and they had to make the decision making using heuristics, because when they said analyze everything, it was just sat there going, that door is not a dog, and then the bomb went off.
Well, at least we knew the door wasn't a dog.
Yeah, so they had to sort of cut back and only analyze relevant and important things.
Yeah.
So we still have an edge over them for now, but yeah, I can imagine it's not going to be that long before we can do, as he says, it doesn't have to be a full-powered AI, it just has to be an algorithm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've had to think quite a lot about this, bringing a new one into the world. This sort of, I've been thinking about, what future am I bringing them into? And I got into a really interesting discussion with a guy in the middle of London the other day who was an anti-natalist.
That's an interesting idea.
Yes. So for those who don't know, an anti-natalist are people who believe it's immoral to have children. And
in the sense of overpopulation, or in other reasons?
They have multiple reasons. The largest philosophical argument, I can't remember the guy now, but is essentially if you're born into the world, you have a greater likelihood of suffering than you do of having a life of pleasure. If you consider all of history and all of mankind, including the third world.
But this isn't all of history. There's the progression.
Yes, that would be part of my response. But if you consider, people, you're more likely to live a life of suffering than not. Therefore, to bring someone into that, it's a higher chance you're going to make them go through suffering. Whereas if you don't bring anyone into that, they don't experience anything, and experiencing nothing is better than experiencing suffering. Therefore, don't bring anyone into it.
That depends on where you set the threshold, and whether you consider 50-50 to be a balance, and whether you consider that pleasure outweighs suffering, and where the neutral ground sits on that. So that requires measuring tools we just don't have, I think.
Yes, exactly. And so it doesn't hold the mustard, but it was still a really interesting conversation. But
yeah, it sounds fascinating, actually. Yeah.
Part of that is the discussion of, in 50 years' time, what will our environment look like? And how many more people will be in suffering?
And how much will be underwater?
Yeah, how much will be underwater? How many will I have wonderful beach property here? Or
when the raccoons take over?
And yeah, there's a lot of discussions in and around that, and where you put the value. So it's been something that's been on my mind an awful lot, of bringing a new life into the world. You feel crazy responsible. I mean, I know you guys have both had kids, but it's proper weighed on me. I've been for months going, I'm going to mess this whole thing up, aren't I?
Oh, don't worry about it. Everyone does.
Yeah. Well, if we take a historical view, as long as I don't beat them, and as long as I don't kill them, I'm actually in the top 10% of parents.
I think you're already in the top. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're up there now. You're still there. Yeah, I'm providing them with healthcare and so on. It's you're well in there already.
Yeah, I'm not doing bad.
Yeah, it's interesting just because of the progression, and obviously I think you've read the Better Angels of Our Nature, right?
Yeah.
So that just gives you a whole perspective change on life reading that book.
Yeah, absolutely. Just how it's that crazy thing, because it was actually one of the hangovers of religion in my life, that I assumed we were heading towards an apocalypse. That's something I think deep within, especially Christianity, but also Islam, various other, apocalyptic religions. And then reading Better Angels of Our Nature, you suddenly go, wait, we're not necessarily heading, it's been getting better. Why did no one tell me?
Yeah, I think we're in the middle of a war between two people now. It's great.
Yeah. I've sent you a message.
Yeah, I've seen that message.
Yeah.
Well, we want to keep this link to the YouTube video, so we'll stick with this for now, and then
Yeah,
what we'll do
stick with
is
it,
we'll
'cause I
do a
don't-
bit of research on the security ways this works, and
Yeah, because you can't trust anybody that's here except the people that.
Yeah.
I don't know the rest.
I'm not sure you can even trust us, Alan.
oh yeah, you definitely can't trust me. I'm actually one of those AIs we're talking about.
Yeah, well, that's for sure.
That would explain a lot, Joe. Like that makes sense. I have to say, Alan, like before, when I was reading your posts and when you were talking to people, you came across as like a certain level of harshness, but like hearing it in your South African accent, where I read it in your accent now, you sound much more just friendly. So
Yeah, it's
difference...
cultural to call someone a dickhead, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, there's different ways of calling people dickheads. It's prize dick.
It just works.
It works.
That's what I was saying to Ben the other week. I was like, I can't believe the language you use. I was like, no, it's like an Irish person saying feck. It's not bad.
It's like an Australian person as well. Yeah.
It's just loud.
Yeah. Poor fella. He still hasn't. He still hasn't. I still haven't had a go with him yet. I haven't had an argument with the guy.
Yeah.
It'll still happen, I suppose. I think I've had an argument with everybody.
I don't recall us having an argument. Did we have one?
No.
No. We're overdue then.
I think quite early on we had a disagreement, but not an argument.
Yeah, only in the beginning. So it only works in the beginning until I get to know you, or until you get to know me. Put it that way, and you get to know that I'm not the arsehole that everybody thinks I am.
Just read it in the accent. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's how it works.
But I also like how friendly you've become with Jason, because to begin with, it was like,
oh man,
and now
he was hard work, but he's all right now. He's
good oak.
So since he's fallen off his motorbike, he seems to have, I don't know what's happened, but he seems to have come right now. Shame, poor fella. Sorry, I didn't mean, Jason, if you're listening, I didn't mean anything by it.
No, we're not laughing at you. We're laughing with you.
Yeah, but he won't. He also, I suppose, it's all the drugs he's on, because he'll probably come on all high. But I wanted to get him on here as well, because he would be an interesting chat.
Yeah, he is interesting, because
from his Masonry days to his Catholicism and to
Well, he said there's something interesting, because I was just drilling in a bit deeper into it, and he said he was currently going to the American Anglican Church, which is it's not the Presbyterians, it's the other one, isn't it?
Yeah, he was going to the Anglican one. Yeah,
but anyway, it's the American Anglicans, and he said, yeah, I don't really want to join them though, because they let me in, and anyone who's let me in is not doing good enough.
It's some quality control.
I thought, that's a really interesting standard.
Yes, any group foolish enough to admit me doesn't deserve me.
It's very Groucho Marx, isn't it? But yeah. No, we need to get him on. But do we want to return back to the topic of mythicism? Because
sure. We didn't really get to go far into it.
Yeah. So as I was saying, definitely agnostic on it. There's just simply not enough evidence, and I think it comes a little bit down. It basically comes down to how you read Paul, ultimately, because
it all rests on Paul, doesn't it?
There are ways of seeing, and pretty much anyone who's serious about the history knows the gospel are mythological. The Jesus of the gospel, and in some ways, anyone serious about it are all mythicists, because whoever we get to by the time of the gospel, it's not a real person anymore.
There's no link between the gospels and the original.
Exactly. So what we're discussing about it is how you read Paul, and I think you know, there are, I think for me, like reading Paul with a mythological lens does work. It works fine. There's sometimes the language is a bit awkward, especially, you know, James, the brother. That would be an awkward way of saying it. It could be.
Yes, yeah.
It could be like that, but it would be awkward. And
and there's also the question of tampering, interpolation, and mistakes, and there's so much of a fog over what's between us and then. We just don't have the original words.
Yeah. But then taking sort of a view of an apocalyptic preacher, and then some of the language fits quite well, but then other bits feel awkward. And then, you know,
if you take the historicist perspective, Paul is really weird.
Yeah. Well, yes, if you take it as just like a kind of minimal historic point of view, you have to turn Jesus into, you have to find a sort of a hole for him to fit in, if that makes sense.
I think the only way to make Paul work from a historicist perspective is to say that the other apostles also didn't know Jesus, and they were all operating on earlier legends, because he never has to challenge that somebody physically met Jesus.
Yes, but again, there could be, so some of the work done around how much Paul was trying to push it away from a Jewish faith does ask real questions on how much was taken out about that, and how much he was trying to avoid evoking anything of a real Jesus if he was just super Jewish.
Yeah, if you want to make it global rather than local.
Yes. Yeah. So if Paul's trying to argue for something global, he's trying to shift it to something else, and is trying to shift it. And I would absolutely agree with you that Paul's Jesus is mythological. And so the question for me really comes down to, is Paul trying to shift it away from a physical to a mythological, or was it just mythological in the first place?
It kind of rests on that. Although he does tie it. So speaking of moving away from Judaism, he does rely heavily on scriptures, which is entirely, well, I wouldn't say entirely Jewish, but there's a few forgeries in there and so on. But in general, this is very centered around the gravitas of the Jewish history, and it was written to have gone back thousands of years, although it didn't really. But Paul is relying very much on that because people were impressed by a pedigree.
Yeah, and I would agree that was absolutely part of it. The question is how much Jesus, if there was an actual Jesus, would have backed up his argument, or how much undermined it, and how much sort of reinvented mythological Jesus helped his argument, versus was the original one completely mythological. And so I see there's like several possible models for a physical Jesus, and one possible model for a mythological Jesus. And so that's and going through the evidence piece by piece, it's like I slightly fall that side, but it's only like because it's not.
So the historical Jesus that you would tend to lean towards is his execution. So presumably he was crucified, because that's a point in Paul.
Yes. Yeah.
But where does Paul get the resurrection story from for that Jesus?
So I would say, see, the thing is anything's possible dealing with religious groups, and I would find it very unsurprising if there wasn't very early stories about a resurrected Jesus. As taking, and literally this is how close it is, because there were obviously mythological figures that rose from the dead, slightly less than people like to make out. You do have to go through, actually that wasn't that post-Christian, but there was still absolutely those figures. And it totally makes sense to me that you have this tragic accident happen and you rely on myths you've heard to go, and he's alive again.
There are plenty of cults where they've had some sort of loss, or even where the leader's just been arrested and they've carried on.
Absolutely. And so then you do just that classic post hoc reasoning, and then you fit it all into how you see Jewish scripture work, and then it all comes out that end.
But if you had a Jesus who had such an impact in his life as to make the cult have that sort of culture shock, that where they reach this PTSD point where they've tried to rationalize it, then it's very odd for them never to mention anything he ever said or did.
Well, again, we are only dealing with Paul's writings at this point, and therefore we are dealing with someone who absolutely, by his own admission, wasn't there. So we don't know how much they were mentioning there and how much he was trying to undermine that in a different way. So that to me is the crux of the question of where the we don't know is. So, and again, it's I'm not awfully surprised, because I really expect if Jesus was a real person and had this real cult, I don't expect it to be more than a few hundred people. I mean, I expect it to be tiny. And
it wouldn't have time to grow that much within a single lifetime, especially a shortened lifetime like that.
Yeah, and a few hundred is my absolute max. 30 wouldn't surprise me either. And therefore considering the ancient world had about 10% of its population actually literate at the time.
That was the basic literacy as well. That wasn't.
That wasn't. So
not the compositional level.
Having 30 people or 70 people, that, and not having someone who's able to write it all down competently within the first 10 years doesn't shock me. I'm not going, how's there not that writing?
Yeah, it goes down the oral tradition road, which is the standard position. In fact, on both sides, because oral tradition is the origin of both positions, except the sense that mythicism is read from scripture. So you do have to have a literate cult leader at the beginning.
Yes.
I think you need a literate cult leader for the historicism one as well, because there's so much about scripture built into Christianity, sort of in the foundation of it.
So in some ways, it's like the actual disagreement is so minute.
Well, yeah, so I take it you agree with Robert Price's comment about if there ever was a historical Jesus, there's not one left now?
Yeah, absolutely. And even if something survived, we have no way of telling what did.
Yeah, Carrier said that. He said if we found an original gospel that was like the story of the actual Jesus, we would consider it a fake, because we would have no way of telling.
Absolutely. So, and I'm very interested by some of the claims that the Gospel of Thomas, the collection of his sayings, there's some of the sayings in there. People are saying actually you could possibly date them really early. Possibly, and again, there's no way of backing that up, and I'm not going to defend that position, but it is quite interesting to have the possibility of such an early saying. But again, that could theoretically be the earliest historical Jesus, possibly, but there is absolutely no way of testing that, absolutely no way of deciding which ones are the right, which ones are wrong. And so ultimately, you do have to, at least in my opinion, where you fall and where I fall is almost identical. It's just it's just me going, I think there was possibly a dude that got killed. That's
yeah, and even on the background, we both got missionary history. We both knew a fair bit about Christianity, but then started to learn more about it and moved away. I did have like a sort of crisis of personality in the same way that you did, I think. But when I hit philosophy, and I already had lots of atheist friends, and because I worked, most of my work friends were also atheists, so I didn't kind of fall out that hard.
Yeah.
And I was able to take a philosophy course with Richard Carrier, which was great. So I managed to sort of rebuild my perspective. And he's done a really solid
foundation. Didn't we work out one time that our parents worked for the same organization?
Wycliffe?
Yeah, Wycliffe.
I don't think they ever actually met each other.
No, they didn't. Because my parents were working on some of the stuff in India and stuff. And
mine were in Chad and around Africa.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah, it's a coincidence. Yeah. Well, England is the headquarters of Wycliffe, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So it's not that surprising.
No. It's my great grandmother would, any kind of instance like that, she would get, it's uncanny, and it always makes me want to say that.
Isn't it Tim Minchin who said when people say it's that a thing is a miracle or coincidence or something. It's like they seem to greatly underestimate the number of things that happen.
Yes. Exactly. It's like dealing with having a child and all the crazy bullshit people tell you about, oh, you've had a boy, therefore this is going to happen, or the bump's this shaped, or whatever. Most of it is completely unscientifically based, but it's exactly that. People see coincidences and just read patterns into it, and it just makes perfect sense how religion starts.
That's how prophecy works.
Yeah, exactly.
They only remember the hits.
Only remember the hits. And I don't know what your guys' tradition was like, but even that kind of, I don't know if you ever did that kind of prophecy where you just sort of pray for someone and then you just sort of say what's in your mind.
As far as I recall, they recorded the prophecies that were done into a microphone, and any hit, then they'd bring back. But obviously, all the misses, they just sort of hit.
The one I used to do that, but in like a smaller group, and people would gather around and pray. And then what you would notice would be really interesting was how much cold reading started happening. So people
unaware of it,
completely unaware of it, but just reading, taking off signals, and going, "Oh yeah, this is God's going to do this in your life, and you're having a difficult time." Difficult time, yeah, definitely a difficult time with
fantastic
sister.
I'm getting a D.
Yeah, D. No, E.
Exactly what I said.
But yeah. We just underestimate how easy it is to do that.
And that's the thing. You think you're participating, and I was in that position before, where like in prayers and so on, it's like I need to participate, and then you sort of wait for inspiration. You don't realize how much inspiration comes from outside.
Yeah.
And you're in a room filled with Bible verses and pictures and stuff, so you're going to get something.
Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, it's like I saw a picture of
a jigsaw puzzle.
Or a jigsaw puzzle, and they've got like a jigsaw puzzle on their shelves.
Yeah.
But these are well-meaning, serious people who, don't.
That's the thing. You can't really blame someone for having their epistemology sort of falsely implanted in the first place. And reading the God virus was a huge influence on my thinking of that. Because when you first drop out, you feel a bit betrayed, but then you realise that they're still well-meaning.
Yeah, and oh, look, my wife's in the background with the baby.
Yes, she's been lurking there for a while.
Yeah, and also how much and it's something I end up saying a lot, because I think a lot of atheists, when they drop out, they feel betrayed, they feel lied to, and they want to rage against everyone. Yep. They actually forget the majority of people are absolutely true believers, not just no one's perpetuating this thing just because they think this will do this, that, and the other. They genuinely believe this stuff.
And I can attest that I genuinely believed it as well.
We all did, didn't we?
One example is I didn't learn any songs on the guitar other than worship songs, because I thought that would cheapen my gift. So that was how much of an asshole I was.
Yeah. And
sorry, Alan. Did you want to say something, Alan?
Yeah. No. Carry on.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to say something.
No. I'm just sitting here listening to you two cackle away.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. And this gets to something I was mentioning before. Genuinely really regret the way I treated homosexuals, but I genuinely was doing it out of love. Like, I really thought I was helping them.
Well, yeah, because you think they're going to hell, or you think you're told as a Christian that homosexual lifestyle or whatever they call it is really damaging to people. Yeah. So you want to help them.
You wanted to save them. This is the thing. Yeah. That's what I wanted to do, was save them from hell. It was an abomination and needed saving. That man needed saving.
But it's another example of Christians ignoring the Bible, because you're supposed to stone them to death.
It's true.
There wouldn't be many.
Not that I'm encouraging them to follow the Bible. But
again, we recommend murder.
Yeah, and then you get accused of taking it too literally. It's like it does literally say that.
That one's definitely in that. Yeah.
There is a hate preacher that was, I forget his name now. He was banned from Africa, and was an American guy can't remember his name though, but he's a hate preacher, in that he takes the Bible literally. And when he means stone homosexual, he means stone homosexuals.
He's still cherry picking though, because I bet you he's never cut off any piece of him that has caused him to sin.
Oh no, he's never chopped off a hand or pulled out an eye or, you know.
There's one part for men that would be favourite for causing sin. You don't see many people taking that literally.
No, you don't.
Although, if more Catholic priests took that one literally,
yeah,
we might have a slightly better world. So chop chop, guys.
Chop chop indeed. Oh, the double meaning. What you need is a tiny guillotine.
We could run a service.
Helping Christians meet the Lord. Wait, that sounds even worse. That's from that Denzel Washington movie, Man on Fire, is it? Where
Man on Fire, yeah.
Forgiveness is between them and God. It's my job to arrange the meeting.
Yeah, that's one thing that religion's given us, just fantastic lines in films.
True. Constantine,
yeah. Cool.
I think we should probably call it there. What do you reckon?
I think we should. We've been going for
we've got a bit of interest. We could potentially have some people. Maybe we could have Fred on and just have a chat for a while and see where that goes. And thanks for joining us, Josh, because I know it's a little bit roughy at the moment.
My pleasure. It was good fun.
It's actually been very, very good. Learned a lot from you.
Oh, good. And always a pleasure.
Do need to pick your brain. Do you get the opportunity to record any of your talks? Because we could put them up on here, or I'd love to watch them.
Great idea, actually. I will see if I can do that tomorrow.
I was thinking there's nobody better placed to do a proper recording.
Yeah, exactly.
Can we also have you with your hands up praising the Lord as well in there? You know
what the craziest one I still do, and there's actually really good studies showing there's like certain benefits to your limbic system. But the crazy one I still do is speaking in tongues.
That's not religious. That goes way back before religion.
It would
babies love doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I still do that, so we could get a good recording of me being and all the rest of it.
Yeah, got to try and slip a few curse words in Russian in there.
Yeah.
Like, did you know about Robin Williams when doing Mork and Mindy? You know, he used to do that high pitched, like really fast babble.
Yeah.
He was cursing in so many languages. And they had to hire people with different languages skills to try and censor out what he was doing. But then he would start using another language because he was so multilingual. I think he was cursing in Russian, Yiddish, French, and like German and stuff. I don't know all the languages, but yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, but he was
every time.
He was amazing though, wasn't he? What is it? Nano? What is it?
Nanu. Yeah.
Nanu, yeah.
Yeah.
They said he got the job for that when they told him to sit down. He put his head in the chair and put his legs up. This is the man for the job.
Yeah, but that's why if I'm ever involved in casting, there's 100 people who come in and try similar things these days, and it's like, no, it worked once, it won't work for you.
It's a very special thing that happens.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, guys, great chatting to you.
Good talking.
Thanks some more for joining us.
Yeah, I hope to see you again.
Right now, I'm gonna cut the broadcast now. Cheers.
Okay.